Welcome back to Off the Cuff, everybody. Appreciate everyone joining us. And today we're going to talk about attitude. Last week we talked about time. And at the end of that conversation, we slightly talked about the value of time as it is when you're blocking it, away, how to manage your time, and how it can actually relate to attitude, right? If you have if you accomplish all your tasks within the time frame that you expect to do so, you've felt this sense of accomplishment and you become positive. And attitude is probably one of the biggest things that you really want to ensure that you focus on and have in your skill set, because it's a skill that you have to create almost.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll kind of touch a little bit more about that. For you, Travis, what does attitude mean to you?
Well, attitude is everything. I mean, there's only two things in life that we can actually control. It's effort and attitude. And attitude basically sets the stage of everything you do in life.
Mm-hmm.
You know, whether you're positive attitude or negative attitude, it literally creates your life. And when I first started in sales, I quickly realized that there's a lot of salespeople, and the vast majority, unfortunately, that like to gripe and complain. And, something's always wrong. Obviously you and I had worked in door-to-door sales together, and, we had a coworker, I won't mention her name, but like it literally every time you talk to her, she's complaining about something. Mm-hmm. Something's going wrong. And back then I kind of like, I went with it and I accepted it, not understanding how that affected me personally.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't until I started reading a lot more about the mindset and, how the mind works and the process of obviously you becoming who you surround yourself with. And it's funny how, a lot of the stuff your mom and dad used to tell you when you're growing up, and
mm-hmm.
how that, really kind of rings true in a lot of it.
Right.
But I figured out that obviously that negativity that not only that she was projecting, but my entire career, everybody was projecting.
Mm-hmm.
And rather than, kind of forcing myself, hey, you need to stop, you need to, get away from me, whatever. I knew that like, no matter if I got rid of one friend that was negative, I'd get another friend that was negative too.
Mm-hmm.
And so I began to kind of forcing myself into positive messages. I began to listen nonstop to motivational seminars, reading the Bible, reading books, just immersing myself into a positive attitude. And I began to realize that the more I did that, the more I trained my mind, the more I became positive, the more my goals just somehow fell into place.
Mm-hmm.
I began to think that, hey, this can work, because I'd heard it over and over and over again. You can. And the more I heard that, the more I started believing it, and everything kind of, fell into place. So that's one of the things that it kind of really got me to where I'm at today, to where it's hard to make me upset.
Yeah.
Very hard.
Right.
But that wasn't always the case. I used to be hot-tempered.
Mm-hmm.
But
do you feel like you had like a switch? Was it like,
yeah.
You know how people always say that, do you have your short fuse?
Mm-hmm.
Do you feel like that was something that you might have had?
Yeah. I mean, it was always something like, it was always, for me, like with being kind of an introvert, my entire life, I'd kind of bottled things in.
Mm-hmm.
So it was always ready to switch, and that was my thing. It's like I switched, I snapped, and things like that. I didn't like that,
mm-hmm.
Growing up, and so I had to change that. But it wasn't until like one day I just miraculously decided to completely change, and I'm a new person.
Right.
It was a progressive thing.
Almost a training.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And just, like I said, immersing myself in positive messages. And over time, it changed. And that's the thing, like, it's kind of like going to the gym.
Mm-hmm.
You start out, you don't really notice anything. It sucks and blah, blah, blah. But all of a sudden, like, somebody mentioned something. Other people start noticing your change. you still don't think you're changed, but it's, because you don't think. And then you begin thinking differently. And that's when you realize that, hey, this has worked. And that's the most beautiful thing I've experienced. Well, one of them anyway, but is having that transformation, and all it was just constant fixation of positive messages over and over and over again. That's the key, is consistency. Mm-hmm. So, what about yourself?
No, for me, I guess I would say my story's personal. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, I could say that there's many professional and personal stories, but the one that kind of resonates pretty well for attitude is growing up. My father was a father figure. Mm-hmm. Many people try to accomplish. I'm a dad, of two boys, and I'm trying to balance that life of fatherhood and being what a father is in society, which is, reprimanding and educating and, teaching, things of that nature. Yeah. And preparing them for life. And the other side is, hey, also be a friend to them so that they can feel more compelled to want to come to you, mm-hmm. more secure in talking to you about certain things and sure. topics that most often they would not bring to a parent. But my father was the latter half. That he was the one that society always looks at, which is preparing me for life. And he did a phenomenal job. I am proud of the person that I am, and I am proud of the person he is and what he taught me. But as he was teaching me all the time, my father was a lecturer. He immediately, the moment that you got in trouble, it was probably an hour of a lecture that you got. And not for nothing, we joked about it. I'm like, mm-hmm. just take out the belt, man. Just go ahead. Just, forget this hour. Like this is more painful than the belt is, right? Yeah. And I realized the message that he was giving me every time, what he was doing. He was coaching, he was teaching, and I grew up and realized there was so much valuable information he provided that I didn't really pay attention to until I became an adult and realized, mm-hmm. holy cow, great information he provided, and basically created who I am. Mm-hmm. So turn the pages now. They're older. I'm older, but now it's like they're the children and I'm the adult or the parent. Sure. And whenever they do something wrong now, I become the lecturer to them. But they never take my suggestions or my ideas. Never.
No.
Yet I was the one taking everything they threw mm-hmm. at me, right, when I was younger. But that's just normal, right? They're older, they're set in their ways, and it's very difficult to change them.
They've earned the right to say no.
They have earned the right, absolutely. But at the same time, it becomes frustrating for a person in any situation. Sure. You hate to give, and never receive. And that receiving for me was them actually accepting my suggestion and doing it. Mm-hmm. And they didn't, and never. And it bothered me so much. And I created this negative attitude because I just felt like I couldn't get anything done. And every moment that I came to find out that they had did something that I didn't agree with, or something that didn't work out in their favor, and I was providing a suggestion, the moment I heard about it, I created this negative attitude because I already knew mm-hmm. that I was just going to waste my time and spend my effort to explain to them what is probably the best thing they should do, and they are not going to do it anyways. So I thought about that, and I said, what am I gaining from this? Am I myself positive? No. Am I improving myself or getting any value out of this? No, absolutely not. Mm-hmm. And they sure as heck aren't, because they're not moving forward with any of it. And it was then that I realized I needed to be positive. When they give me a story or they tell me that they're dealing with something, I just need to listen. Go in with a positive mindset and have a discussion. And if they wish to take my suggestions or not, so be it.
Sure.
It's at the end of the day, it's their issue. Yeah. It doesn't affect me. If it does affect me, obviously I would be more involved. But if it doesn't, then it's something that they've gone ahead and taken, and they'll have to deal with it themselves.
Sure.
And it took a long time to figure that out because I just really was negative. And what happened is that our conversations were negative because they already were prepared for me to lecture them that they became negative.
Sure.
And the moment that I didn't buy into this to the conversation as much, and what I mean by that is that the moment that they brought up the topic about what they were dealing with, and I really didn't, acknowledge it and start immediately lecturing them, and more so went into it with a positive vibe, I now started receiving what I was giving,
Sure.
which was they were positive, and they almost saw the issues that they were having and ultimately created the topics and suggestions that I would have given.
Mm-hmm.
But you feed off of that energy and that attitude, right? And, what is that? Negativity creates, or creativity, what did you say?
Yeah, so negativity blocks creativity. So if you ever get in an argument, and you always think about, 10, 15 minutes later, man, I should have said that.
Right.
That's the reason you didn't say it is because you're in a negative mindset. You block any kind of creativity. You block any kind of, positive, outcomes and solutions because you create that negativity.
And so that absolutely, that's a great phrase because this ties into it, right? They because they had that negative attitude, they couldn't create their own outcomes. They couldn't create their own better ideas, and until I was feeding them positive attitude, were they able to finally do that. Yeah. So it was amazing. Something so subtle and so easy was just the change that we did. So there's a lot of takeaways through our stories, right?
Yeah.
I would say the first is that part about negativity is contagious. And, I think you have really good points on that. But for me, real quick, is that when you're talking about the negativity and how contagious it can be, my story really tied into that. It wasn't until I created that positive attitude that they themselves felt like it was necessary to be positive as well. But how often do you have a conversation with somebody negative, and it's like a light bulb in everyone's mind? Well, if he's negative, I gotta be negative. I gotta be negative. And it's just a feeder. It's something that just immediately feeds into everybody, and it's energy that is not good, but it's common.
Sure.
And it's contagious. But here's the thing: positivity can be contagious as well.
Yep.
And the reason why negativity is so contagious is because it's bias. Because there's negative bias, right?
Yeah, we all have negative biases. Right. Our amygdala in our brain is the almond-shaped part of our brain. That's our emotional center of the brain. It's our fight or flight response. It is by nature negative. It needs to protect us. We need to survive. So anything that we feel that goes against our thoughts is negative. We put up a wall. You brought up as far as your parents, having that switch, and whenever it became positive, there was more dialogue in the, it wasn't a negative situation. We weren't necessarily fighting the situation. It's the same thing with the Steve from a couple things back, but
episodes ago, yeah.
Yeah, when he talked to me, our first conversation that we've ever had was negative. So that for me became symbolic. Hey, every time you talk to me, it's going to be negative, so I don't listen to you. We can't have a great dialogue and conversation because you've already created that, established that precedent. And that's the thing. Like when we have that negative bias, we know that everything that comes at us, our reaction is going to be negative because our mind wants to protect us. It's not because, hey, we're just negative people. We just got to realize the fact that it wants to protect us. And if we can train ourselves to switch, to take a step back before we talk, before we jump into whatever situation we're in, if we can take a step back and say, what's good about this? I just totaled my car. What's good about this? Well, now I can take the bus, and now I don't have to worry about a car payment anymore. Those are obviously extreme examples, but what's good about this?
Right.
Having that mindset of what's good, and that's the key. Like if we can just, like I said, switch, understanding the fact that we are negative by nature, we can switch. We're going through a lot of stuff in society right now
Right.
And you'll tie in this a little bit, but you can see other people, and does the conversations of our leaders, does the conversations of our neighbors, does that play into our reactions? And to me, I said we are all responsible for one person. We have children and everything else, but at the end of the day, we're responsible for one person.
Yeah.
And that's us. And obviously, you can kind of touch on that a little bit more.
Yeah, and just real quick, I mean, that example about you getting into an accident, that's a great example, because you immediately, what do you go to? That negative situation. But if you stepped out of that vehicle unharmed, that's a positive.
Mm-hmm.
You haven't injured somebody else in that accident. That's a positive, right? The fact that your car is damaged, it can be repaired. Or if it's totaled, get a new one. If you can't get a new one, there's other options. But those are things that you look at in a positive light, and that's often the case, not the way people look at it.
Mm-hmm.
They often look at it as, oh, like you said, man, my life is ruined now,
Yeah.
And it's difficult because it's ingrained in us, it's, think about how you grew up, you watch your parents and they're frustrated because the water boiled over and now everything spilled over. Oh man, frustrated. Now I can't make dinner, or dinner's late. Rather than like, oh, okay, I'll clean it up, no problem. Oh, you know what? Actually, this gives me an opportunity to make this because I didn't. Now that I think about it, right?
Yeah.
It's crazy because it's so hard to think that way. But it's possible. And the moment you start, you may never go back, right? To thinking negatively first. You might think negatively, but not first. Now, when you think about negative biases, you also can really fit in or tie in identifying the negatives.
Mm-hmm.
So not only internally are you, realizing and altering how you're envisioning negativity around you, but now you're paying attention to what's around you. And like you said, in the world today, it's crazy. It's like you're watching a movie. I would never think ever in my life that we would experience what we're going to today. And it immediately wanted to put me in a negative situation or feeling, because I immediately thought about my kids. I'm like, my kids are growing up in this world. I'm glad. But then I said to myself, positive way, you know what? They're 6 and 4 years old. They have no clue what's going on. And you know what? Things are going to get so much better. This is just a way that, you always hit rock bottom. To me, I feel like we've hit rock bottom. And which way can you go after that? Up.
Sure.
So we're going up. No problem. Things happen, and that's the case. But that's where you look at those identifiers. I guarantee you majority of the world, or I would not even say the world, the majority of the country were looking at their TVs and seeing what was happening and transpiring at that moment, and there could not be one probably person that was saying, oh, this is okay. This is something good will come out of this. Except there was one person that I know of. That was me. Because I looked at the TV and I saw all this going on, and I said, as much bad that is happening, there's a lot of good. And why? Well, I wasn't there and I'm healthy. My wife is healthy. My kids are healthy. All this that has happened right now is past now. Okay, let's move on. Let's figure something out. Let's get better about this. Can this be a learning experience? Can we look at this and say, how can we not make this happen again? Those are positive things, right?
Yeah. And if you think about it as far as and we'll wrap this up, but you mentioned obviously your kids. They can look at the situation that we're going through right now and saying, how can we get it better? They can create new things. If you look at all the great minds and philosophers and achievers in the world, they looked at scenarios like, what's wrong? What's the problem? Where's the problem? How can I fix it? They literally are problem fixers. And if you, like I said, if you look at those things that are going on in the world right now, if you look at some social dynamics that are at play right now, and find out how can we achieve it, If someone comes out and becomes the next Martin Luther King, because now we're going to reunite the communities, this is a good opportunity for them to do that.
Yeah.
And again, just moving to a positive, because everybody wants positive. Mm-hmm. Everybody wants something to look forward to lean on, because at the end of the day, like we want positivity for ourselves, but maybe we don't ever get it because we haven't trained ourselves to do it. So we lean into other people that are positive. Mm-hmm. And that's our opportunity right now, is if we can become positive, we can create a following. We can create a leadership experience. We can move people. And whether you're, housewife or, husband or father figure or a leader of a company, creating that mindset, gathering people around it, and being a positive influence is a huge opportunity right now.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more, Travis. And I think this was a good topic, and I think this is something that'll resonate with many. And I sure as heck know that it resonated for me and you, right? Mm-hmm. And it's made us better individuals for it. So I thank you all once again. This wraps up our episode, and we'll see you next week. Thank you.